Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. Oh, it is a great day because we have the forge hot. As you can see, we're making some Damascus, and as you already know, we're making a Damascus steel basket hilt rapier. This is going to be an exciting project. I am excited that the forge is roaring today and we are making sparks and moving steel. I'm also excited because I'm going to be trying some new stuff with the Damascus. And I'm also excited for the simple fact that we're making stuff, and making stuff is awesome. So we're going to give her a little squeeze. It's a little hot. Then give her a little fluck. Right, so now we're going to weld it. Lately I've been really liking using the hydraulic press for welding because it's got a much deeper throat and it really does move a hell of a lot of material in one go. Look at that, just a few squeezes. It's amazing what 25 tons of force will do. So the steel is now hot for the third welding heat here. Switching back to the power hammer. Because the press is powerful, and though the power hammer itself is quite powerful, I get a greater degree of control. I can keep stuff flatter. My goal usually when I'm making a Damascus billet is doing several iterations of drawing it out into a long piece. However, right now, my goal is just to square it up a little bit. So I'm not trying to go too far. Just want to take quite a number of welding heats, get it welded. Then we're going to do something pretty special. That's all we need to do. So now we're going to let it cool down nice and slowly. So this is annealed and ready for some sawing. You probably want some sort of an explanation as to what's going on, right? I am trying something that I saw my friend Mareko Malmassi, check him out on Instagram, talk about on his Instagram page. What I am doing is I am taking the steel, we've got W's running up it, I'm now cutting it in half and we're going to flip it around to get opposing C's. Let me show it on the board. We start with a stack of steel with layers running straight up and down it. You saw me forge it down, you then saw me round it and then flatten it. We then took that bar and cut it up in 7 pieces, arbitrary number. That gives us something looking like this. We forge that down into a rectangular block like this. Then, on this side here, and on the opposing side, we ground it, removing the scale with first an angle grinder and then run into the surface grinder. First time using it on a project. We ground it flat, then I welded it on to a sacrificial bar of mild steel. We've clamped it in the saw and we are cutting it down this way. Let's see how the saw's doing. Okay, back to the whiteboard. This is pretty boring. So what we have done is we are in the process of splitting down the middle of our W's. These are called W's because if you look at this on the side, it looks like W's. We've split down the middle. These W's are currently facing themselves. We are going to take this piece and flip it around. We're going to take this piece and flip it around so that the ground surfaces are touching and so that we go from this to this. I'm super excited to see how this looks in the Damascus here with the C's facing apart like an inverse W. I think is going to look awesome, and from there we're then going to be able to have a look at it and we're going to be able to manipulate the pattern, make some fun stuff once we see how wonderful that looks. So back to the saw. And then we're going to weld it together. And then we're going to go back in the forge. And thank you to Mareko for your incredible tips on Instagram. I'm looking forward to cutting this piece up and going and doing some more of the blacksmithing and the hammer. Oh yeah, here we go. Looks like the cut went really nicely, pretty straight. pretty square. Oh, that's pretty cool. It looks like we bandsawed half the way down a drill and tapped hole in the bar that was supporting this. That's super cool to see. Anyway, we are going to bring these over to the table, and we are going to break the welds from the supporting bar. There we go. So obviously here is the inside of the material. You can see the bandsaw cut. What we're going to do is we are going to flip both pieces. So we're now on the surface ground surfaces, and they're going to go like this. However, you see it's not square from that weird cut there. So I am going to weld on the ends, and then we're going to go ahead and quickly throw this in the mill, and we're going to take off these high spots here with a face mill. I think that should nice and quickly get that down, because the trouble is if we start trying to hammer on this, when this is out of square, we're going to be applying pressure only on this side here, and it's going to have a tendency to want to open up that weld. Super important this weld is tight, because after it's welded, we're working down in this direction, which is an easy way to split the weld if it's not nicely put together. So we're going to square it up to help that process. But first, I want to make sure these things are held securely. So we're going to TIG weld on the top and bottom. You can see that is in the fire and it is heating up. The pieces have been flipped. I milled off those tops there, so it's flat-ish. This way, when we hammer it, obviously we're going to get as good of a weld as possible. In order to help make sure that that happens, I welded around everything. No oxygen can get in. We're going to get a good weld. I'm damn sure of it. And in fact, come back over here. We explained a little bit earlier, this is what it looked like. We cut it, we flipped it around. This now is what it looks like once we weld it. There's going to be no seam, and in preparation for doing like an explosion-y type of thing, what we're going to do is we're going to take this pattern that's now square, and we're going to forge, once it's welded, on the diagonals to the point that we go past it being an octagon, and in fact, forge it into a square 45 degrees to the apparent material. And what that's going to do is that's going to set all this pattern flowing really nicely out from the corners. It's really going to make it beautiful. And then obviously that's going to be the start of a very beautiful, hopefully, reverse W explosion pattern. And then there's going to be one more thing that we do that's going to be rather special. So when we weld this, it's going to end up square with the pattern 45 degrees to where it was. Square bar, you know, maybe like an inch in diameter. It's gonna be good fun. I'm so excited to see how this looks all the way up a rapier. There's a lot of thinking that's going on. This is gonna be fun. So I'm just giving it a few blows, then it's straight in for another heat. We want to make sure that we're working at the top of the heats, so we're not hammering on it while it's not welding. Certainly for the first little bit. Again, this is a critical weld. We don't have a lot of metal movement to do, and the more you move the metal, the more you strengthen a weld. All we're doing is working it down, taking it straight to square, and then going on the diagonal, which is an easy way to tear it. So I need to be really careful, as I said. Here we go, welding heat number 2. Now I'm going to hit the sides, and I'm going to be careful on the sides, make sure that weld's consolidated. I think we're all good. Back in the forge. Here we go. Okay, so right now we've got a square. We can now begin to square it 45 degrees to where it is now. That's going to set that pattern on the 45. Hopefully it looks really beautiful. So back in the forge. So at a nice hot heat, we're going to come out and gently touch off the diagonals. Be careful when you do this, because you can easily go too far, and you want to do just a little bit at a time. Take your time with it, and make sure you're working at the top of the heat. We're almost too cold. I'm going to do one more pass. Make sure you work nice and evenly so the pattern stays even the whole way down the bar. I'm gonna take one more light heat to clean it up. Right, so we're gonna anneal this. Right, so while that is cooling down nice and slowly, we're gonna take this piece of steel, we're gonna cut off a section. Now this is 1055. This is the same steel we have running down the edge of the claymore. It is the same steel we made Real Engineering's knife out of. It's a 0.55% carbon. Plain carbon steels very handily. The last two digits in the American terminology represent the carbon percentage generally. And the first two, when those first two digits are 10, as in 1055, they tend to represent the type of alloy, whether it's a chromium alloy, whether it's a nickel alloy, or whether it's a, for example, in the case of 1055, just like a plain carbon steel. So this is a plain carbon steel. It's going to hold up pretty well for the edge. It's not as ideal as the 1080 material, which is indeed better, but it's going to work just fine for this. Righty-ho, these two pieces are cooled down. Again, that is the 1055 steel. Right here we have our Damascus. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to trim the ends on both of these pieces of material. And I might as well do it at the same time. So we're going to throw it in the saw like this. We're going to make both cuts simultaneously. We'll then be able to look at the pattern in the end here. Oh my goodness! Look at that! You can see the pattern popping through from the end of the billet already, and it looks amazing. I cannot wait to see this. Check that out. That is gonna be so cool. Oh my goodness. Time for an Instagram story. Follow me on Instagram at Alec Steele. Holy guacamole. Look at how beautiful that pattern is. Oh, I cannot wait to see that etched. So as I said, into the saw we go. We'll turn her on, we'll cut off a slice. It's been cut. The ferric chloride is here. I took it up to about 120 grit here. We'll plop her in for a little bit of a test etch. Oh my goodness, that looks cool. That is so cool. Look at that. That pattern is unbelievably awesome. Big thank you to Mareko for his awesome Instagram posts, helping show us all how to make some pretty cool patterns. So now I'm going to set this up again, and we're going to make two cuts on our Damascus. One more cut to match the length of our three pieces of Damascus. One more cut here on the 1055. It's going to give us four pieces of equal length, and we're then going to be able to make each piece perfectly square, and we're going to be able to stack it up. I'm going to get this cutting. Meanwhile, we are coming back to the whiteboard here so we can have a look at a little more detail as to why it is that we indeed have the 1055 bar, and why it is that we're cutting our Damascus in 3 and not 4. So you saw me add in a second square here to show you the pattern and how it would look. Well, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to show you the 1055 in purple. Imagine the orange is blue. I'm going to draw our reverse W, and this is going to be the next step. We're going to square up all our pieces so that they fit wonderfully together. We've got the equipment. All it's going to take is the time, and the better the fit here, the better the weld. With this, that's going to be drawn down. We are then going to re-square it. So we're going to take this. It's going to be turned 45 degrees. We're going to have a bar where we have the 1055 material here on one side, making a triangle, and our 3/4 of an explosion here, filling out the rest of it. And I think this is going to be pretty interesting, especially when we draw that down into some flat stock and we got this crazy pattern with this sharp triangle of solid material. So go ahead and drop a comment if you have an idea about what I'm going to do next and how that might look. Because boy, let me tell you what, when we do what I'm planning to do, I think this is going to look crazy up this rapier. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Right, so here we go, out of the saw. This here is the 1055 piece, and I've gone ahead and marked it with a chisel like this, just so that I know which one it is. Now there is an issue. You'll see that our Damascus pieces, here, here, and here, are pretty square, straight off the hammer, which is good. 1055 piece is really rhombused. Just in case you've forgotten, a rhombus is a toppled over square with no 90-degree corners. The trouble with a rhombus is when you put it in a square, you end up with a lot of play there. So if there's air, it means that there is opportunity for it to oxidize. It also means that you've got to hammer it more until the surfaces are touching, which is only when it can weld. So, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to square up our rhombused piece, and then we're going to get the other pieces to match that. Now, in this instance, I am indeed going to try and make sure that we have 4 equal sides that are square, and the sides are the equal dimension from all the pieces. Okay, so I've got this mounted about how I think is best there. I've got copper on the back, I have 1 parallel on the bottom, and I ground the back of a ball bearing here. And so what we're doing is we are clamping this with the ball. That is putting pressure in one spot, not over it all, which is important because this thing isn't perfect, so we'd either be clamping at one end or another. This means that we are now just flat against the back jaw, obviously with some copper. Hopefully this is a good way of establishing our first flat face to then reference off of for the rest. So it just looks wonderfully square. I can't tell you how thrilled I am about that. And I'm really pleased that the little tidbits I've been learning about machining are paying off even in knife and sword making. 31.96, 31.99, I'll take that. So now all I've got to do is I have to do this to all 3 of these. So I am really, really happy that over the past little while I've been doing so much machining, because I tell you what, I would not have been able to do this with this level of accuracy. Obviously it's not amazing, taking very heavy cuts, but it was super simple to do. All the pieces are really nice and square and sit really nicely. As you can see, I've gone ahead and etched it. Our Damascus has been etched and it looks wonderful. I am so excited to see this put together, and I'm really, really excited to see how it looks when we then re-square it also. Right, the piece of steel is back in the fire. What you saw me do is I cut off the end, we etched it, and we worked out where our little diagonal of 1055 material is. So that when we flatten it in the axis to make it on the edge of this piece of steel. Let's turn the power hammer on, and let's start forging! Right, so I'm going to make sure this puppy is straight here. Get as much of the scale off as we can. 2 points of contact, hit the hump, and just like that, we are about there and ready to leave it to anneal overnight. Tomorrow we're going to cut this up, and the idea here is to make the coolest Damascus that any rapier has ever seen. I really, really, really want to knock it out of the park with this project. I want to have a lot of fun. I want to try a lot of new things. I want to go crazy with it. push what it is that I know, and of course bring you along for the journey. So make sure you subscribe so that you can follow along with it. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, because we are gonna get this Damascus ready. We're gonna forge the blade, and I'm so excited. Can't wait to bring you along. If you're watching in the future, make sure you go right down there and find part 2. Thank you so much. Give me a follow on Instagram while you're at it, at Alec Steele. See you very soon.